Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. I know it's been a couple of weeks since we streamed. Hopefully you saw some of the updates on either the YouTube channel or Facebook or Instagram. We had some flooding in the basement. A couple weeks ago, we had just like torrential rain here. Some of the area got like 8 inches of rain in like 4 hours. And so it was just massive amounts of rain. And we actually live in a part of Illinois that has a really, really high water table. Like flooding in this area is pretty common. Our basement has a whole dewatering system. And because of that, we generally don't get any flooding in the basement. Occasionally we get like this tiny little puddle at the bottom of the stairs, but like for the vast majority, we don't have any issues. But for one reason or another, our sump pump just opted not to pump out the water. We're not totally sure what happened there, but we came downstairs and there was like 3 inches of water in the basement. And 3 inches of water was enough to soak into a lot of our cords laying on the ground, anything at ground level, all of my shelves back here, started sucking up water and all that. So we got the water out of the basement. We got as much of the stuff we could carry out and start drying out. And it just took us like a week and a half to get everything dry and clean and in some cases replaced. So some of our cords had to be replaced. Some of the power supplies for our studio lighting and stuff like that. For the vast majority of my stuff, my yarn is all in plastic totes, and you've seen me drag them onto stream before, but like all of my good yarn is stored in that. I did have a few small fabric bins over here that were, everything in those was garbage. Once the yarn had started sucking everything up, it rose pretty quickly. So even though the water was only this high, it wicked up pretty quickly. But I think as far as casualties of flooding, we didn't have all of that much stuff lost. The vast majority of my stitch dictionaries were lost, so those I'll have to replace. And my sewing patterns, and I think that's really about it. Oh yeah, I did have all of the little sheep's katana skeins, which were actually on a shelf over here, but the bottom shelf of the bookcase right behind me was all books, and so when they sucked up water, they had all expanded and knocked like the walls of the shelving unit, like they bowed out, and then all the shelves fell off up high. So everything that was on the upper shelves up here started falling into the water. So I did lose that. That's actually kind of an expensive set. I got it 40% off, I think, but we had terrible rain, and then we had like 90-degree days and like super, super humid, and so nothing was really drying. And it wasn't 90 and sunny. It was 90 and overcast and like crazy humid. And so we couldn't really get things to dry out super well. And that yarn was one of the things that just would not dry. And really, when you have that much water in the basement in the house, like the whole rest of the house is not dry enough either. Like it was just, everything was like damp feeling in here for days. So most of the work was just having to move literally everything in the basement and mop and clean underneath. So it was a good opportunity for us to go through some of our bins and all of that. I got all of my fall decorating done. And so at least, some of that was, we got to go through some of our storage room over here and all of that. So, yeah, I guess we've got the studio / craft room put back together, and we're ready to start streaming again. So that's good. We didn't lose really any camera equipment. All of the things that we lost were mostly power supplies that had been sitting on the floor to do lighting and things like that. And so we have actually rerouted everything, which you can't see intentionally so. But all of the cords are running across the ceiling now, so there's no plug sitting in water. So that was one of the things that we've redone and rerouted so that if we were to get water in the floor again, that we would not have an electrical safety problem, which was one of our biggest issues. Is we had power strips sitting on the floor, and then those were actually sitting underwater. So, but yeah, other than that, we're about ready. I mean, we are ready to get back to business here. I have not really been able to record anything. So obviously no live streams, but also no recording. So I haven't really made any progress on videos and things like that, but that doesn't actually mean that I haven't made progress on some projects. So I've got those to show you guys tonight, and then I've got a whole bunch of new yarn to share with you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on sharing some of the yarn. Just kind of glance through the comments. So just mostly people acknowledging that. Peggy saying the Missouri River is very high. Yeah, we live very close to the Illinois River, and that's been pretty high. I don't think it's reached flood stage, but things sort of tend to move obviously downstream, and so I'm sure the Missouri River is getting hit with all of the flooding from about a week ago further north. So that and then I think Missouri also got quite about the same amount of rain that we got. So welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. And thanks for sort of hanging in there and waiting until we could get back up and streaming again. Joyce was saying, how can we help? Really, we're pretty lucky as far as things go. We lost a few things, but mostly anything that we've got is easily replaceable and really wasn't very expensive. Because our basement already has a dewatering system and like that, we don't have drywall. We don't have all sorts of things like that would need to be replaced. It would, all things considered, even though we got 3 inches in the basement, it was really just work. We didn't monetarily, like, we're in good shape, and as far as like products and things like that, we really didn't lose all that much. So we sort of lucked out in that. So really all you can do is join me for future live streams. So I'm gonna start pulling out some yarn here. I've got quite a bit stacked up here next to me. So let's see. I've got, this is a Red Heart yarn. It is Red Heart Roll With It Melange. This is not a terribly new yarn. I think it's relatively recent. But I've got it here in a whole bunch of colors, and then one that I'm working on. The reason I went out and found this yarn is that there's another designer on Facebook that I found who designs under the name Crochet by Jennifer. And she had this swirl hat, and it was such a cool looking hat. I obviously haven't finished this one yet, but you can see it's really got kind of a cool, like, step looking pattern to it. This is a paid pattern. I am struggling to remember what the name of this hat is. But I can see if my husband can find it. What do I search for? Crochet by Jennifer. It should be, if you look on Ravelry, it should be one of the most recent things she's published. But anyway, so this is Roll With It Melange by Red Heart. Let's see, what do we got here? It is a number 4 medium weight yarn or worsted weight yarn. They recommend a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, which is an eye hook, or a 5mm US 8 knitting needle. It is a 150 gram ball with 389 yards or 356 meters. It's 100% acrylic. And I have it in, I think, all but one color here. So I have Curtain Call, Paparazzi, Autograph. So that's dark. I'll start again. So this is Curtain Call.
Do you want to show them on the other screen?
Sure. We'll switch cameras here and I'll show you over here. So, Curtain Call, Paparazzi, Autograph. What do I got here? Green Room, Catwalk, Hollywood, and I don't have the label for this one. I don't remember what it's called. There is one additional color that I was not able to get, and it's kind of unfortunate because it's a color that I really wanted. And I don't, again, off the top of my head, I don't remember what it was called. They're all like Hollywood themed type of names here. But there was a really cool, like light purple looking one. And I was able to get these from Hobby Lobby and they did not have that color. It was just out of stock. But I saw this hat. The designer has it worked up in pretty much every colorway that the Red Heart Roll With It melange is available in. And it just works up so cool. It works out that as you're working the rounds of the hat, so what this yarn does, it's kind of a weird striping yarn. So it's got, you can see along here, there's a section of like this peachy pink, and then there's this section of blue, and then there's kind of a section of, I don't know, like seafoam. And then if you look, it repeats over here. So there's blue, there's the peachy pink, there's the seafoam. And so what ends up happening is you work it such that you've got these long color changes. So there'll be like a whole bunch of stitches out of this seafoam, and then a whole bunch out of the like peachy pink, and then a whole bunch out of the like teal blue, and then it starts over, and it works out that the colors pool. And so what you can see is that as I worked this around in a circle, every time I got back to the colors, so you can see like here I worked a row of yellow, and then I worked a little bit of green, and then sort of a yellowy green, and it sort of continued around, and I worked some more yellow. And so like every time you work all the way around in a circle, you're getting back to that color change. And it just sort of works out that the colors sort of pool together, and it's really it's a cool yarn. I always think self-striping yarns are a little bit magic. So I don't really understand how it works out that the math just works and the colors pool, but it just does work. So it's kind of a cool yarn because you get like sort of these puddles of color. And so I don't know. I really like the way it looked. It's a pretty, even though it looks relatively complicated, it's a pretty straightforward pattern. And really only requires that you know how to do post stitches. So if you know how to do post stitches, then you can do this no problem.
It's called the Spiral Herringbone Slouch.
Okay, so it is called the Spiral Herringbone Slouch by Crochet by Jennifer. If you happen to have, I thought I had her book.
They probably can't hear you.
I thought I had her book, but it either got lost in the flooding or I haven't. It might have gotten carried out of here and then didn't get put back yet. But I thought I had. She has a book. she has a beanie version of this, which is worked top down with a very similar pattern. And then this one is worked brim up. And then you'll gather it, and it's intended to have a pom-pom on top. I have no idea what color pom-pom I can even put with this. I've got a huge selection of pom-poms over here that sit behind me, but like I don't know if any of them are gonna look right with this. Maybe this blue one will work. But anyway, when I get to that, I can maybe bring it back out onto stream and we can sort of decide what looks good with it. But I thought it was a cool yarn, and if you're looking for an interesting, quick little project, this seems like a very well written pattern. It's pretty straightforward and really isn't all that difficult if you can do post stitches, which are pretty easy to figure out. I don't believe I have a video on post stitches, but it's on my list of things to do. A quick tutorial on front and back posts. So I'm gonna clear these guys off and glance over here at the comments. Christine's saying that she's going to make a cowl with hers. It would make a beautiful cowl, especially if you work, well, really, you could work back and forth and then join it, or you could work in circles. Both should end up giving you some color pooling. And Peggy said it's pretty. I really thought that, like, it was just such a cool pattern and worked so well with the yarn, which is why I went and got it and bought it in every color. I also think if you're working children's size hats, that you can get 2 out of a ball. I'm not sure that you can get 2 adult hats out of a ball, but I will let you know as soon as I get this one done. I don't think I'm halfway through my ball, but I am to the, like, gathering stage on the hat, so I'm going to start reducing how much yarn I use. So there might be enough there. There's almost certainly enough for a hat and then matching gloves. So if you wanted to do fingerless gloves and a hat out of this, I actually think that Crochet by Jennifer might actually have matching fingerless mittens for that yarn. So, or for that that pattern, the herringbone. What was it called? Spiral herringbone?
Spiral herringbone slouch.
Yeah, so I think she's got a matching spiral herringbone fingerless gloves, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So along the line of, let's see, what do we got here? All right. So what I showed you a second ago was Red Heart Roll With It Melange. This is Red Heart Roll With It Tweed. And so I've got the colors Potpourri, Violet, and Neon. And so these are 150 grams again, so same as the last one, but this one is 296 yards or 271 meters, and they're still calling this a number 4 worsted weight yarn. So this is a little bit heavier because you're getting less yardage for the same amount of weight, but it's still a number 4 weight yarn. I have not broken into these balls, but it looks like these are more, I guess I wouldn't say they're traditional striping yarns, but they're going to be all the same color for big chunks. So they're a tweed style yarn, so there's multiple colors worked at the same time. So you can see on this one, which is called Potpourri, it has green and purple and like a peach color all twisted together. And you work all of that for like a big chunk. And then it switches to teal and purple and like cream. And then it switches to multiple shades of teal. And then switches to purple and teal. Multiple shades of purple. And then finally to, looks like peach and like a cream color. And so all of the colors sort of play well together, but each section is slightly different than the last section. So you get stripes, but they're all tweeted together. So I found this yarn, the Roll With It tweed, and so I bought a couple of colors of that, and then I happened to be at Walmart, and they had mandala tweed. So this is obviously competing pretty closely with a yarn like this. You can see they're basically the same yarn. If you just took the labels off, I don't know that I would be able to tell you the difference immediately, but let's see what they're claiming the differences are here. So the mandala tweed, you get a little bit more. It's 200 grams. For that, you get 568 yards or 520 meters. They're calling this a number 4 worsted weight yarn. They're recommending a 7 needle, which is 4.5 millimeters, or an eye hook, which is 5.5 millimeters. And then this one is also 100% acrylic. So they're both 100% acrylic. This one's slightly finer. You get a little bit more weight, but you're getting quite a bit more yardage here. Almost double, I think. Let's see, where are we at? There it is. So 296 yards versus 568. Yeah, you're closing in on double, even though it's only 50 grams difference. So this is a finer yarn. I would say just by feel here, the mandala is a little bit softer. It just has a little bit nicer hand to it. The Red Heart's not bad. It's definitely softer than like a Super Saver, but it's not as nice as the mandala, I don't think. I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not totally in love with any of the colors here. I liked these a bit, and I thought they could make interesting projects, but there's a lot going on. If you take a look at this one, real quick, this one's called 7, and this one is called Lucky Penny. So that's the two colors that you've got here in the mandala tweed. But if you take a look at this 7, it might even be named for the amount of colors going on in here. There actually might be more than 7. But it's just chaotic. It starts here on the outside. It's green and orange, and then goes to like green and yellow, then sort of a green and gold, then teal and purple, then purple and like Lucky Charms green, like almost like a Kelly green, then sort of a neon yellow and aqua, orange and teal, getting to a darker teal, fading to like an orange and melon, or I'm sorry, teal and melon, to sort of a magenta and purple, to a magenta and pink, to purple and pink, purple and orange, like orange and like a sort of a gold and purple, kind of reminds me of Viking colors, like the Minnesota Vikings? Yeah. And then back to that like green colors again that were on the outside. So that's a lot of colors going on in here, and it's just a lot of look. There's a lot going on here. To borrow a phrase from Tim Gunn, like there's just a lot of noise going on. This one's really bright neons. It's kind of fun, but I almost feel like the Red Heart ones are a little less crazy. There's still tweed, but there's a few less color changes and more like defined chunks. The mandala is just going nuts. So could be fun, could still make for a really nice blanket, they're all shown with scarves. So it could be a really nice scarf. It looks like they worked their scarves long ways. So you'd work really long strips back and forth. The Roll With It shows a scarf worked the short ways. So back and forth. So you'd have short chunks of the colors. So it's down to personal preference. It's something that's a little bit different. Pretty much everyone has a tweed yarn out right now, and so that must be sort of the popular thing. We're coming into, we're in the middle of fall, and tweeds are always popular for fall in general. So mixing in some bright colors with sort of the tweed idea is something interesting. But it's, for me personally, it's a little bit much. But I guess I would say between the two, if you need something that's a little heavier, you are going to want to go with the Red Heart. If you want something softer with a little bit more yardage, you're going to want to go with the Mandala. But I think both are fine choices. They're 100% acrylic yarns. You get a pretty good amount of yarn in each ball. And I don't know. I don't have any hard opinions yet without having worked them up. All right. Yeah. Stephanie was talking about the previous yarn, saying that she was loving the colors on the Roll With It melange. And then Joyce is saying that they're too busy. And I tend to agree. There's just a little bit too much going on for me. Yeah, in the tweed yarns, especially in the Mandala one. All right. While we're on the topic of Lion Brand, these are not new yarns, but I did notice something really interesting when I was at Walmart. So they carry both of these yarns, and they're stocked in the same place in the store. And what I noticed was that a few months ago, I saw that they had Woolies cakes, and they were striped cakes. They, self-striping. Woolies is a long-standing Lion brand. You can get Woolies Thick and Quick. You can get traditional Woolies. You can get all sorts of Woolies lined or branded Lion brand yarns. Generally, they're 20% wool. Yeah, this is 80% acrylic, 20% wool. It's a 150 gram ball, 590 yards or 540 meters. It is a number 3 light or DK weight yarn. They recommend a 3.75 millimeter knitting needle or a 5 millimeter crochet hook. That's a pretty big discrepancy, actually. But an H hook for crocheting. And this color is called Hades. So it seemed like a nice yarn. I didn't pick any up when I saw it originally. It was just another self-striping yarn. And I had bought a lot of yarn recently when I had originally seen these a couple months ago. The thing that I noticed when I was in the store the other day was that they now have a mandala wool blend. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what the difference is. And there isn't one. This is still 150 grams, still 590 yards, 80% acrylic, 20% wool. Still a number 3 DK weight yarn. Same hook recommendations. 3.75 millimeter knitting needle, 5 millimeter crochet hook, which is an H hook, and is called Aphrodite. Which means that they didn't even bother to change up the color names. This is Hades and this is Aphrodite. They're going for, Greek mythology.
Well, do they both have all the same colorways?
I didn't look on Lion Brand's website before we started streaming tonight. My husband's asking if they both have the same colorways. I think what they did was that they originally started branding under the Woolies and then opted to change it to the Mandala. The Mandala is a new yarn that's been very popular for them. Woolies was sort of their old workhorse brand, and so I wonder if it wasn't selling much under Woolies, and so they switched it to Mandala. It might not have been selling much because I think they released this in June, and nobody really wants a wool blend. Wool is fine in summer. I wear wool sweaters, but people tend away from wool blends because they think they're hot, and releasing a wool blend yarn in the dead of summer is probably not the best idea. So, I don't know if it wasn't selling well under Woolies and they decided to sell it under Mandala. I don't know if they're doing a sort of an A/B test where like they're just gonna see if they sell out of Woolies versus selling out of Mandala. Like they put Mandala in some stores and Woolies in other stores, and maybe like one of these was just a return from somewhere else. Um, but yeah, I thought it was just a really strange thing. And just sort of wanted to share that with you. And I don't know, just something a little bit interesting. But both of these yarns feel pretty nice. They have very nice, like, I really liked the colors. Like, this is obviously colors that go well with pretty much everything I wear and own. This had really kind of a nice fall, like, volcano-y, fiery look to it. Sort of feels a little bit campfire-y, a little bit, I don't know. I like this color. So, both of these were nice colors. The yarn feels exactly the same. There's no way that I would know the difference between the two. And like I said, realistically, I'm pretty sure they're the exact same yarn. So, yeah. So, if you want to see those a little bit closer, again, this is Hades and this is Aphrodite. Frankly, I probably would have named them opposite, but I'm not in charge of Lion Brand's naming schemes. Yeah, so Joyce is saying they look pretty from here. They're actually very pretty yarns, really pretty, like nice deep fall colors. Peggy's asking if I like the DK weight. I really do like DK weight. I tend to work with finer yarns. So if I'm working on a project, for me, it's almost certainly in 100% wool fingering weight, or you know, maybe like an 80-20 wool nylon blend or something like that. But it's almost certainly fingering weight 100-gram balls of yarn. So for me, a DK weight is actually sort of a heavy yarn, and when I start getting into like the really thick yarns, like something like a Woolies Thick and Quick or a blanket yarn, it feels just absolutely gigantic. And I think it's part of the reason that I've got a review on the channel about the Lion or the Bernat Blanket Big, and that was just, for me, like miserable to work with. It was so heavy and just like the total opposite of what I usually work with. And it had some struggles working with it. So I think a DK weight is a really nice weight to work with. It works into shawls and sort of finer, prettier patterns really well. But also can be used for like blankets or, heavier weight items. Just fine too. So, I don't know. I guess I'm pretty happy with DK weight, and I think most of the Mandala yarns, with the exception of Mandala Thick and Quick, are DK weight yarns. So, set these guys aside. I've got a few more things to show you. So, these are yarns that I have shared, but they had restocked at my Hobby Lobby, and they had a couple of really nice colors that I wanted to share with you. I'm not sure if these are new colors for lines, or just they were sold out previously and they were always part of the line. But what I have here is Sugar Wheel Cotton. It is 100% cotton. It's a 5-ounce ball, which is 142 grams. It's 335 yards, or 306 meters. It's a number 3 lightweight or DK weight yarn. They recommend a 4mm knitting needle or a 4.5mm US 7 crochet hook. And then this color is called Mountain View, and it is just really a pretty color. It's got this like smoky gray, then sort of a light charcoal, not quite black, light pink, and then sort of a rusty dark red, and just really pretty color. And I don't know, I really liked it. The colors that I got before in Sugar Wheel they were sort of pastel and a little bit more rainbowy, and they were going to be fun for a baby blanket or a kid's project of some sort, but I didn't really feel like it was very adult geared colors, and this one sort of changed my mind on that. There are a few other colorways that fall into both like more adult or more kid like, but one of the things that I really like about this yarn, it's not mercerized, but it does have pretty nice colors. So I've talked before about mercerization and how much nicer a lot of the cotton colors look on mercerized yarn, but mercerized yarn doesn't feel quite as soft and cottony. This is actually a really nice silky feeling cotton, and has pretty nice looking colors, I think. So, Stephanie's asking if I've ever used DK weight to make a shawl. I have. I'm trying to think what all. So I've made, actually the rainy days shawl that I know that Stephanie's recently made was made out of mandala, and that's a DK weight yarn. I don't know. Maybe in the basket underneath here. I can move to pick this up. Give me 1 second. I will move some stuff here. You might not be able to hear me because we changed our microphone setup. This yarn here might be DK weight or it might be worsted. I don't remember exactly what yarn this was. I bought this at I bought this from a local yarn store, and I don't remember. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the yarn. But this is, I've showed that Fortune Shawlette shawl before, and this is the same shawl worked up in a heavier weight yarn. So I think this was a DK weight that sort of bloomed. So sometimes when you work up yarns with like alpaca in them, or mainly alpaca, there's another yarn that blooms really like a lot when you work it up. But it'll feel very, very fine when you're working with it, and it'll make like a really nice pattern. And then when you go to block it, it puffs really badly, and you sort of lose a lot of your detail. And I think that's what happened with this, is I think it's got an alpaca element to it that bloomed, and the yarn puffed a little bit. So, but you can still see the pattern in there. Still looks pretty nice and is nice and cozy, and I like it anyway. So, but to answer your question, excuse me. To answer your question, I absolutely have used DK weight to make a shawl. I don't do it super often. I tend to use, like I said, 100-gram fingering weight balls of yarn. But generally, a DK weight you can still get away with making a pretty nice shawl. Even into worsted weight yarns, you can make a pretty good shawl. When you get into the heavy yarns, you have to use a really big hook to get any drape out of them. So if you wanted to make a shawl out of something really heavy, like thick yarn, you would have to go to a gigantic hook to make up for the size of that yarn, because it won't bend and like flow nicely, and you'll end up wearing like a board instead of a shawl. All right. Moving on. Oh, we've got a couple more questions. Peggy's just saying that this would make a really good guy's color, and I agree. The pink's a little bit light, and so it would have to be the right guy, but otherwise, yes, it would be a really nice guy's colorway. And there were a few other colors that would have fit into that category as well. So a few that were a bit darker and, you know, would be fine for a more masculine project. And then, like I said, there were a number that were pastels that would have been good baby or kid project. But really just very nice colors in the Sugar Wheel line. This is another yarn that I've showed before. This is the Rainbow Rhapsody yarn. And there's a couple of different companies that have yarns that look almost exactly like these. Sheep's Whirl, and then I'm trying to remember, there was another one that we've talked about before, but these are color changing yarns that have a little bit of a tweedy element to them. So they've got these sections in here where you can see that they're two-tone. I thought these ones were interesting because the colors were so deep and so dark. And this is a 60% cotton, 40% acrylic blend. And so these are some really, really intense colors for a yarn that's the vast majority cotton. So just as a reminder, these are 7-ounce balls, which are 198 grams. They're 918 yards, or 839 meters. They are calling this a number 1 super fine yarn, which is also fingering weight. And they are recommending a 2.75 millimeter knitting needle or a 3.25 millimeter crochet hook. Again, 60% cotton, 40% acrylic. And this color is called Peacock. And this color is called Wild and Free. But just, I had shown some before that had sort of white pale centers, and one went out to teal, the other went out to like a dark blue, and they were a little bit more mellow. These are a little bit more intense and really would make a very different type of project. But this, if you're looking for sort of a cheap alternative to like the sheep's yarns, especially if you're in the United States, the sheep's yarns are expensive, and then you have to import them, and so they get more expensive. They're somewhere on the order of $20 to $25. If you happen into Hobby Lobby on a week where yarn's 30% off, you'll get this on sale. But if you happen on a week where it's not, then there's a 40% off coupon. So again, this is Yarn Bee from Hobby Lobby, and these balls are only $8.99. So if you get it 40% off, you're getting it in like the $5 range, and that's a really fantastic deal, I think. So yeah, moving on from these guys, I just wanted to show you some better colors on, or not better, but different colors on some of these yarns that I've shown before. So
Stephanie is talking about the Rainbow Rhapsody. Shane is asking where that's from.
okay, Stephanie's saying she's obsessed with the Rainbow Rhapsody and been eyeing them. I think they're really pretty yarns. There's a bunch of companies out doing very similar things, and honestly, I've mentioned before that Lion Brand is doing all sorts of, innovative and releasing just tons and tons of yarn, but I don't know that anybody's releasing more yarns than Yarn Bee. So Yarn Bee is Hobby Lobby's house brand, and I have noticed in the past couple of months that they have really upped their game and are just competing with every popular yarn. Like, you name it, they've got a competitor to it. I showed a few weeks back, I showed some Lion Brand Frothy, which is like I don't even know how to describe it. It's a really like crinkly yarn. It's upstairs in the unicorn bag. But it's this like really crinkly yarn, and they've got a competitor to that. They've got a competitor for Bernat Blanket. They've got this yarn that I just showed, the Rainbow Rhapsody, which is competing with like Sheep's, and I think it was called Hobby, which was also from outside the U.S. HOBBI. I think somebody recommended before. Looks just like the Rainbow Rhapsody yarns. But really, they've got you name a yarn, they've got a competitor, and then they have some that are just in a league of their own. I did a review recently of the Must Be Merino, and I did eventually think of one other company, a big box brand that's using merino, and that's Red Heart, which released Chic Sheep, which was 100% merino wool. But Must Be Merino doesn't really have a competitor that it's facing right now, and that's available in a bunch of colors. And so I don't know. I really think that Hobby Lobby's doing some interesting things right now. And so is Lion Brand, and I think really Red Heart, Bernat, Yarn Inspirations, I guess, is the parent company there, sort of needs to up their game a little bit. Red Heart's released a few things here and there that are pretty interesting. But yeah, there's been some interesting stuff. Peggy's asking price comparative also. I think in most cases Yarn Bee is priced just a hair higher, but then they do have, you can use the 40% off coupon, and a lot of times, probably, I would say 2 out of 4 weeks of month, the yarn is 30% off. Maybe it's 2 out of 5 weeks or something like that. So if you can wait a little bit, you can get 30% off of your total like yarn purchase, and that brings it definitely into the competitive range. It really just depends on, well, it depends on a couple of things. I think Hobby Lobby gives you a good amount of yarn for what you're paying for. So, for example, this like Rainbow Rhapsody is $8.99, which people might balk a little bit at, but it is 198 grams or 918 yards, and that's a good size fingering weight shawl. A 200 gram shawl is a pretty sizable project, and you're talking $8.99, but if it's 40% off, you're back into like the $5 range, and $5 for 200 gram shawl really can't be beat. So I think that the price is competitive, but I guess that's sort of everybody's budget dependent, I guess, a little bit. So anyway, the last thing I've got to show all right. So this is a yarn from Yarn Bee, called Urban Chic, and I thought it was a really cool yarn. They had a sample worked up, and the colors are just really interesting. So let's do some stats here, and then I'll talk about this a little bit. These are 100 gram balls, 3.5 ounces, sorry. 100 gram balls. 284 yards, 260 meters. They're a number 3 lightweight yarn, which is a DK weight. They're 78% acrylic, 22% cotton. They use a 4.5 millimeter knitting needle or a 5 millimeter H crochet hook. And I've got the colors berry. Where did I just read the color? Golden Grace and Gray. Which is kind of a lame name for that. But anyway, Berry, Gray, and Golden Grace I've got here. So these yarns work up kind of interesting. They've got big sections of sort of a similar color. So this is like a medium gray. We'll start with the gray. There's kind of like a darker gray and then a medium gray that they like work up. Sorry, my hands keep blocking the view here. So there's like a dark gray section, a light gray section, and then there's like this little colored section here. And this works up as just like a couple of little rows and then big chunks of gray. And then a couple of little rows and then big chunks of gray. And so it works up really a little bit reminiscent of the Bloom yarn that I've showed before. Premier has a Bloom yarn that like makes a little pattern. This just makes like a little stripy section in a darker colored section. And so I thought they were really cool colors. I like grays with sort of the neons. I assume that all of the speckled parts that you're seeing in here are the cotton. So it's mostly polyester with about 22% cotton. And so I think all of the like tweed sections are cotton. So the gray, and then this one is sort of like a gray and then a taupe and then a gold and then like dark gray and white sections here. So that one will work up like that. And then there's this burgundy section, which has a really dark burgundy and then more of like a cherry color. And then there's like a light mauve, and then they've speckled in a little bit of blue, and it looked really cool. They had a sample of this worked up, and it looked really neat. So I think that these are destined to either be cowl and fingerless glove sets or really nice big shawls. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to use these for, but they were too pretty to pass up, so I got 2 of each of the colors I liked. There were like 6 or 7 colors that they had available there. And all of them were really nice, but these were the ones I couldn't leave without. As far as yarn goes, that's all I've got to share with you tonight. Toss these back. I've got a couple of projects that I'm working on. So I showed you the hat out of the Red Heart Roll With It melange. A couple weeks ago, I shared a Harry Potter scarf that I had worked on out of the Marguerite stitch, and it was done in blue and silver out of Yarn Bee Must Be Merino. I'm working on another scarf. So the little girl that the first scarf is for is a twin. And so her twin is getting a Gryffindor scarf. She got a Ravenclaw scarf. And so this is the Gryffindor scarf to go with it. So Yarn Bee was available in burgundy and gold. And so for those of you who know Harry Potter, that'll make sense. For those of you who don't, they're house colors that go with the Harry Potter stuff. And so I'm doing this one. The other one I did in the Marguerite stitch, and I did big chunks of blue and then quick stripes of silver and then big chunk of blue again. And then these I'm going to do more even stripes. So it'll be like a small chunk of burgundy, small chunk of, so there's I'm working sort of like a light wave type of chevron stitch here. And so I'm working the short way. So I'm doing short rows and then just tons of repeats here. But I just started in on this one last night and just got a few rows in. But I'm going to do a short chunk of burgundy, short chunk of gold, and then alternate back and forth. So it'll be slightly different, but I don't know. It's what I'm working on right now. The other thing, so I guess I should throw in their birthday is Monday, and so I've got to get this done, and then I'm also working on crochet edge blankets for them. And you might have seen, if you follow me on Instagram, ooh, sorry. That might have been really loud. You might have seen, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, that I shared an edging that I was working on. And that was for this blanket. And so I went ahead and used that edging. I got sort of mixed response with it. We'll see if... But I was working on this edging. Sorry. We reset up the studio, and so the cameras are at a little bit different angle. And I was never good at them anyway, so... Anyway, I'm working on this edging here, and this blanket's actually done. There was a little bit of debate on whether... there, I tipped it, so it's visible now. So I was aiming for... There's a symbol in the Harry Potter books that's called the Deathly Hallows. It's a triangle with a circle in it and then a line down the center. And so I was trying to make that shape. It turns out it's actually pretty easy to crochet a circle. It's relatively easy to crochet a triangle. It's near impossible to crochet a circle in a triangle with a stick down the middle. And so I did my best here, and it's not perfect. And then one of the other things that comes up in the books and whatnot is that there's a crown that goes along with this particular house, and so some people said it looked like the crown, and so I just went with this border. I don't know that I'll write up a tutorial for this unless there's quite a bit of interest or something, because I don't know that it turned out exactly the way I wanted it, but I think it will make an soon-to-be 8-year-old pretty happy. So I do have a live stream tutorial on how to do a crochet edge blanket. It's a little rough around the edges. We were having some streaming difficulties, and it's an earlier stream, and so it's not perfect. We're planning on redoing the crochet edge blanket into an edited video that'll be a little bit more clean cut and a little less rambling. But if you're interested in doing a crochet edge blanket for a quick project, you can definitely check out the live stream. Really, all you need is a piece of fleece, some yarn, and a skip cut blade. You can use scissors. You can draw out all your lines and mark them, and I'm pretty sure you'll hate it. So if you have a rotary cutter, you get a skip cut blade. It looks like a little gear, and you just run it along the edge of your blanket, and it cuts little holes in the edge for you, and then you can stick your crochet hook in and make little single crochets. And I would get it out and show you, but my skip cut blade is actually at work. So one of the things here is that I did a double layer blanket. You can see I've got gray fleece on the back side. I don't often do double layer fleece blankets because they're so heavy, but these are going to be replacements for comforters, and so I wanted them a little bit heavier and a little bit warmer. And so it's really, really easy to do single layer fleece blankets. You cut the edge on. You don't have to worry about like positioning the fleece. You can just trim it up a little bit with a regular rotary cutter or with scissors. But when you do double layer blankets, you have to lay the fleece on top and then not move it, because if the fabric shifts, your holes won't line up. So you have to cut it and then pin as many places as you have pins available. Obviously not all the holes, but you have to pin it pretty good along the edge, and then try and rotate it without like having the fabric slip a whole lot, and then cut it again and cut your holes. And so it turns out it's actually relatively difficult to do a big piece of fleece double layer without, moving it and having the fabric slip and having a whole bunch of problems. So I tried doing it I have a cutting table. That's what I stream from here. My cutting table is about 3 feet wide and 3 feet deep, and I think about 4.5 feet wide, which was just really not big enough to work on this blanket. So I moved the table out of the way, and I did this one on the floor. And I mentioned before that I'm in my basement here, and so it's concrete floor, and that was pretty rough on my knees, and so I took everything to work with me. I have a pretty big table at work that I can cut on, so all of my stuff is there because I've got the other blanket ready to go. So you can see where I'm at here with this one. Whoa, sorry. I'm not used to the microphone being over my head. I'm used to being laved up, and previously the microphone was much further away from me than it is right now. So I keep hitting it, and I apologize for that. So this is the other blanket for the other twin, and you can see here I've got my holes cut. You might be able to see them from this side here, if I can get that onto camera. So you can see along the edge here, there's like dots. Each one of those is a space. Let me tip this right. I think you can see those. So there's dots along the edge here, and each one of those is a spot where the blanket got cut. And you won't be able to see it very well through here, but they're cut through both layers. And yeah, so it's actually relatively easy to crochet into this. Let me see if I've got a crochet hook. You just really have to like feel around, and you can get through both layers pretty easily. And you just work the yarn through here. You just make single crochets through here all the way around, and then you can work pretty much any crochet border around the edge. So any border pattern, you can just do double crochets. You can do fans. Like I said, I tried to do something a little bit fancier on the other blanket, and I don't know how it turned out, but I think it looks fine in the end. But I really, really like fleece crochet edge blankets. They look really, I guess I don't know what the word is, but they look so much nicer in my opinion than like the tie blankets. They just look a little bit more refined, and they look like, you know, a lot of effort went into them, and they're really easy. This blanket I worked up in one day. It's a huge blanket. So you can see it's I think it's 2 yards long, and full width of fabric wide. I just have my ends to sew in here, just the two ends, and it was less than 100-gram ball of yarn to do the whole thing all the way around. So to make a blanket this big would have probably been, I don't know, 10, 15 balls of yarn, and weeks and weeks of effort. And if, you know, the twins decide that they don't like Harry Potter in 2 years, it wasn't, you know, 6 months of my time making them a Harry Potter corner to corner blanket, and then another 6 months to make one for the other twin. These are easily going to be done by Monday. So, like I said, if you really want to make one soon and you want to see roughly how to do it, I have an old live stream that shows how to do it in a little bit more detail. If you wait a little while, we'll attempt to get the more refined, like, edited version of how to make a crochet edge blanket together and get it out to you guys. We're a little bit sort of off kilter here because of not live streaming and not recording for a couple of weeks. We're kind of behind on all of our plans to get videos out. So we will get back to business here pretty soon. So I've done a lot of the talking tonight. If you guys have any questions, now would be a great time to ask those. If you've got yarn questions or things that you've been wondering about the last couple of weeks, projects that you've been working on you want to talk about, or anything like that. Hopefully you did see the notice that we weren't streaming and stuff like that. If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Experiments in Crafting, I do try and post updates there. I also did post on the community section of YouTube. I don't know, I always say this, but I don't really know how the community tab works. I don't get notifications or anything like that if people post on there or anything like that. So it's a weird little tab that I don't really know if people actually use. With the Facebook, I did actually, so apparently what I had was a Facebook page, which was just really a place for me to post updates, sort of like a business. One of the things I'm trying to get together is that there will be a Facebook group where all of you can join and discuss with each other and post and comment on each other's pictures and have a little bit more community around these, you know, these live streams and things that I share, but also things that you guys share, and sort of get to talk to each other a little bit. Stephanie's asking what I plan to use the Rainbow Rhapsody yarns for. Those are almost certainly destined to be some sort of large, sort of gradient-looking shawl. There's a couple that I can think of that might look really good in those dark, bright colors. And then there's totally different ones that would look good in like the teal and navy blue that fade to white. And so I'm not 100% sure what I want to use those for, but those are almost certainly destined to be shawls. And then what future projects I'm looking forward to right now. My focus is on getting these things out and that hat finished, because I'm actually pretty excited about getting that hat done. I don't wear a lot of hats, but the last hat that I had was 100% alpaca, and it ended up in the pocket of a jacket that got washed and shrank, and so I don't actually even have a homemade hat that fits me anymore. That hat shrunk up pretty tiny, so I'm looking forward to getting that done, and hopefully kind of goes well with my hair and whatnot. So that's right now what I'm working on. And then I don't know where where I'll go from there. I've got so many different new yarns and so many projects that I'd like to get done. I guess one of the other things that I'm really looking forward to is getting back to sewing a little bit. I've got a bunch of sewing projects that I want to get done. There's a couple of sewing videos that I want to get out, but I've got fabric for curtains around my house. I've got fabric for curtains down here. I've got a couple of fabrics that I want to make into pillowcases for gifts. And so I've got all these different sewing projects that I really want to get back into. And so I guess there's a number of crochet projects, but actually I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is doing some sewing. It's realistically been probably a year since I've sewn anything for myself. I do occasionally sew at work. Let's see. Shalene's commenting. She just finished 2 shawls, a Pure Innocence shawl, and using Karen 1 pound. And then saying that it's stiff, even with an 8mm, they're still stiff. So much work for not pleasant reward. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, with a heavier yarn, you really have to go kind of crazy with a crochet hook, in order to get really nice drape. And that gets the difference in how big you have to go with a crochet hook gets larger as the yarn gets larger. So it's not just, like for example, if you use a fingering weight yarn, they might recommend like a 3 hook. And then you have to go to like a 3.5 to get nice drape on a shawl. And if you use a DK weight yarn, they might recommend a G hook. And to get good drape, you might have to go to an I hook or something, like a little bit bigger, but really only 1mm or 2mm difference. When you get into big yarns, you have to get like 6mm bigger than what they're recommending. Really kind of crazy differences to get drape, because the yarn is heavier and doesn't want to bend just on its own. And then when you start knotting it together, it really doesn't want to drape nicely. So for shawls, you kind of have to go pretty giant with the hooks.
Is there anything she could do to save that project? Like, it's probably acrylic, but you can still
Yeah.
acrylic a little bit, right?
Yeah, so my husband's saying if there was anything to help out with that project. One of the things that you could try, even though it's acrylic, you could try blocking that shawl and seeing if you can open it up a little bit. I'm not familiar with that shawl offhand, and I don't know if it has any lacy sections. But I have a couple of videos on blocking, and one specifically on blocking acrylic. It spray blocks pretty well. So you would just wet it with a spray bottle with water, maybe a spray bottle with a little bit of fabric softener or hair conditioner, and then you stretch it and pin it. And if you stretch it and open up those stitches and tighten your knots a little bit, it might drape a little bit better. Alternatively, you could try washing it a couple of times. It is 100% acrylic, so it should be able to go in the washer and dryer. If you wash and dry it a couple of times, it might get a little bit more flexible on you. The risk you run is that it might pill a little bit on you too. So acrylic can pill pretty badly if you machine wash and machine dry it. But if you just line dry it, then you probably are going to want to block it and pull it to the shape that you want it to be. Open those stitches up a little bit. So, let's see. Joyce said that she just finished some hats and cowls for charity and working on Christmas gifts, including a Lost Souls scarf. Lost Souls scarf is kind of a interesting, cool scarf. It's one of those things that I see tons and tons of people make, but I just don't know who I would give it to. I guess probably my sister. But she's not much for wearing shawls. She is pretty big into Halloween, though, and it's kind of like a spooky, I guess, look to me. Kind of looks like skulls worked into pineapple lace. So it's one that's been around for a while, and it's pretty interesting. And then, let's see, Shalene said, made a flower puff shawl using a 4mm hook and cotton, and could have gone higher. So, sounds like that one turned out a little bit better for you. Cotton should block a little bit better too. So if you want it to, drape a little bit nicer, cotton should block a little bit better for you. What's that? Cotton Fair is a number 2 yarn, my husband's saying. So yeah, that 4mm hook is probably in the ballpark of the correct size. You maybe could have gone higher, like you said, but that's probably about right. But yeah, cotton should be able to be blocked. I tend to wet block things, but I don't know that I would wet block cotton necessarily, just because it takes so long to dry. I probably would spray block cotton. If it's 100% cotton, you can also steam block it. If it's got polyester, nylon, or anything like that in it, I would not recommend steam blocking it. But steam blocking is basically just taking a steam iron and getting it hot and steamy over the yarn and stretching and pulling again and pinning in place. But the heat kind of helps work and make it a little bit more permanent. And so those are all options for attempting to make things drape a little bit nicer. Some shawls absolutely have to be blocked, and a lot of people don't tell you that, and they don't really say, like, hey, you must block this shawl, because people don't want to tell people what they have to do. But if you want it to look like the designer did it, it's almost certainly blocked in some measure. All right, let's see. Stephanie's saying she's got a hard time deciding on a shawl or project to make with a yarn, because she wants to make everything. I think that's probably the most universal feeling among crafters. Like, you'll hear people talk about, like, cast-on-itis, which is like a knitting what do I want to say, like, fun term that people will say, like, they just want to, like, keep starting projects and don't ever, work them to completion. So I definitely have that problem. I've got lots of projects started. There's a whole wall of bags of projects over there that I've started and not finished. Sorry. Excuse me. But yeah, I don't really have any good tips other than just pick something and start working on it, because you'll never get anything done if you don't just start something. And some things just are gonna stay in your list of want to makes for a while until you get to them, or until you find the perfect yarn that does what you want, um, or works perfect for that project. Let's see. Peggy's saying she's making the Lost Soul Afghan for her youngest daughter because she loves Halloween, and making. Oh, just that comment a couple times. It repeated. Yeah, that. Like I said, yeah, it's gonna. So my husband's saying Lost Souls Afghan. I think it's basically the same stitch pattern, just worked in a rectangle instead of a triangle. It should be a nice open pattern. It's kind of cool because if you're just out wearing it about, I don't think people immediately see the pattern in the shawl. And the same with an Afghan. If it's just laid out, you might not immediately see that pattern. But once you realize what it is, it's kind of a cool, like, hidden message type of thing. So, let's see. Stephanie's saying she's got 3 things going and itching to start something else. I don't even know how many things I've got going right now. I've got so many things that are in progress. I've got a wall of sticky notes off to the side that are all different ideas for projects to make for you guys. And then just, like I said, an entire wall of bags of things that I've started and not finished. And some that I'll probably never finish, but don't know exactly what I want to do. I'm not a big fan of ripping projects out, even if I know 10 lines into them that I don't really care for the project. But yeah, I can tell you right now, there's a beautiful purple yarn with like these rainbow speckles sitting up in my bag. I've worked a cowl about halfway up, and it is just not working up the way I wanted it to. I wanted the color to pool a little bit differently, and I just haven't had the heart to like rip it all back out because it was kind of a lot of work. It's solid single crochets, worked in the round with a fingering weight yarn, and so it was days and days of work just to get it to like this tall. Obviously not working continuously, but it's a couple weeks worth of work that I need to rip out. Upstairs in the unicorn bag. It's on the couch in the den. But yeah, I haven't had the heart to rip it out, and it's absolutely a gorgeous yarn that I want to use for something else, but just haven't gotten around to ripping it back out. So Peggy says she's guilty of the same, I assume, of the wanting to start new things even though you've got a whole bunch of other things going. Shalene says she can't do that. She feels rushed to get stuff done, then it's no fun. 2 things at most going at once. And yeah, I think there's probably equal amounts of people who work on one thing. They buy the yarn for one project, and they work on that one project, and they get that one project finished, and then they start a new project. And I know a lot of people who keep one home project and then one like travel project, something small to work on. I've mentioned before, I have like a weekly knitting and crochet night at the library, and some of the people there have a project that they're working on at home, and then they just work on washcloths when they're at crochet night. It's on the couch in the den. But it's they have a project that they work on just at crochet and knitting night because it's a easy, like, repeatable project that they don't have to think about. And so if they start talking, that it doesn't matter that they didn't get anywhere, and 2, they are unlikely to make mistakes because it's just a super easy, like, simple repeat type of project. So my husband's looking around for that yarn for me, so I can show you the project that I haven't ripped out yet. But yeah, so any other questions or comments about things going on? A few people have weighed in on what they're working on. How many of you have started your Christmas project list? I have not even dived into Christmas stuff. I've got to get through birthdays here first. So this is the one that I was talking about. So this is several inches of work here. And you can see this was a Rachel Newen Designs, I think it's called the Highline Cowl. I wanted a nice tight cowl. This will stretch a little bit in blocking. But you can see I was working these stripes and then something happened right here. And all of my horizontal pieces started going, or like the parts that were making this stripe started sort of stacking on each other. So I've got some sort of mistake in this row. But really, I don't know if it's this pattern or if the yarn doesn't work exactly the way that I thought it was going to. But this yarn isn't really pooling up like I expected it to. And I don't know. It's just maybe not the right yarn for this cowl, or maybe it's not what I wanted the yarn to do. But I'm not thrilled with the combination of yarn and project. And then, of course, I've got this mistake here. So I need to rip back this many rows. And whether I just rip out the whole thing is sort of where I'm on the fence about. And so it's just been sitting. This is a yarn called Fairy Witchcraft from Sock Obsession Yarns. They make absolutely gorgeous yarns, and I've got a bunch that I'd like to work with from them. So I need to make a decision on this and rip it out and restart or fix that section or whatever I'm gonna do with it. So let's see. Yeah. Shalene said that it's cool about the meetup night. There are usually a number of get-togethers, local get-togethers, pretty much around the country. There's probably something not too far from you, but I guess I don't know where everyone's located. So depending on how far away from the nearest town you are, it might be a little bit out of range. But I would say most decent size cities. I live in central Illinois, and the Peoria area is not a massive city, but there's probably 25 or 30 meetups. Different days of the week, different times of day, different goals. Some places are only knitting for charity, / crocheting for charity. Some groups are working on their own things, and so Shalene says she lives in a town of 265. So yeah, that might not work. A meetup of any amount of people there is a appreciable part of the town. So, but there might be some people in the area looking to meet up and do something. So maybe you could start one. If there's enough people around that knit or crochet. Let's see. Maggie May says she's working on Christmas stuff now. Peggy said she's also started and she's got a very long list. And Stephanie said she's not even thought about it because she's still got birthdays before then. And let's see, a couple of people saying that they really like the yarn here. Both Shalene and Stephanie saying, Shalene said it looks galaxy. It's a really pretty yarn. It just, like I said, I'm not disappointed in either the pattern or the yarn. I just maybe am disappointed in the combination thereof.
What does the ball look like?
The ball looks like this. So it's a little bit more, huh?
That looks way cooler.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more speckled. I think that this pattern is just not lending itself to the way that the yarn pools. What I really need are really short repeats. Yeah, so because it's got, the purple section is only really short, I need these to lay on top of each other so that they pool. And so really what I need is something with pretty short repeats. And this has really long single crochet rounds. So it's just not cooperating particularly well together. And then Shalene's saying she has all of us, and that's great. And like I said, I'm working on getting the Facebook group part of the Facebook page together so that we do all have a community area to go to. So if you go to Add Experiments in Crafting, you get dropped into my Facebook like business type page, and I'm working on the group type page where it can be more informal and like discussion. People can post things, all that. So I'm working on it. I think there are like 2 people who are members. And so it's slow going building that up. But in the meantime, there's always Instagram. Stephanie's saying that she noticed the silicone band I'm wearing. So normally I wear my actual engagement ring and my wedding band, and then I've got a amethyst ring that I wear on this hand. I was in the mood to bake last week. I really do enjoy baking, and I made pie dough, and I took my rings off. And then Saturday I was cleaning and I found the silicone ring that I had bought a while back, and I put it on, and so I've just been wearing my silicone band. I really probably ought to wear silicone instead of my actual rings, because I do work in an area that I probably shouldn't have rings on. But I actually really like the silicone band. I've been playing with it tonight, which is probably why you noticed it. I think it's pretty comfortable. My only problem is that when I was wearing the one before, and actually you can see it already a little bit on this hand, they do tend to trap like soap and water underneath. And so if you don't move them and dry your hands underneath, your skin does get a little bit dry. I still get this with my regular rings too. Just not quite as bad because they don't take up as much skin. Like this is much wider than my engagement ring and my wedding band on this finger. Even together, they don't take up that much space. So, yeah, I've got this one, and then I've got one that I cannot find. I've looked everywhere for that's got like a lattice imprint on there. This one I think came from the jewelry store, and the other one I ordered from Amazon, and I don't know, I really like them. So, but yeah, the idea here is that if you were to get your ring caught on something, that it would break the ring instead of, causing worse problems to your hands. So, but yeah, they're generally targeted towards like a people who work in dangerous situations, and then also people who like work out a whole bunch or run or might have their fingers swell. So like a lot of times like pregnant women will wear them instead of their wedding bands because their fingers might be a little bit puffier or something like that. But in my case, I work in like a sort of semi-dangerous job. With hot things and moving parts and whatnot, and so I probably ought to wear the silicone more than I normally do. Generally, I have gloves on or I take my rings off though at work. But then there's always the risk that I'll lose my rings. I actually found out yesterday or the day before, I was talking with a coworker, and she said she has a necklace that has lobster claws on both ends, and so you put the clips around your ring and you can wear it as a necklace. And so when you don't have your rings on, you clip the claws together. And when you do have your rings on, then you clip it to each side of the ring and it hangs straight down. And so I thought that was pretty cool. Just kind of a neat idea to keep your rings close if you have to take them on and off regularly. I then was looking around online, And there's a couple places that sell wishbone shape. So it's a necklace, and on the necklace there's a wishbone pendant. And so if you think of like a shape like this, your ring slides over and then can't fall off because the wishbone flares out. And so you take the necklace off over your head, you drop your rings down, and they fall onto the wishbone. And then you put the necklace back on over your head, and they can't fall off. And so I might actually buy one of those because I do, like I said, occasionally have to take my rings off. Right now my rings are sitting in a dish that I keep above the sink. There's a shelf above the sink, and they're sitting there, and they'll sit there until I remember to go put them back on because I have a bad habit of taking them off to protect them and then forgetting to put them back on and then being annoyed that I don't have my rings on. No, it's okay. My husband said he wanted to know if I wanted to go get them. So, anyway, Stephanie's asking if the sizing is the same as my regular ring. They generally don't come in partial sizes, and I just usually look at the Amazon reviews, whether people say to size up or size down. So like, I think my rings are sized to like 8 1/4 or something like that. And you can only get like, an 8, a 9, a 10. And so they stretch a little bit. I think I like mine a little bit loose, because then it can move around a little bit and let my skin breathe. So, anyway, that's about all I've got to say about that. All right. Well, if there are any last minute questions, now's the time to ask those. Otherwise, we will probably wrap up, and barring flooding or other natural disaster, we should stream again next week. Trying to think if there's anything that prevents that, and I don't believe that there is. So yeah. Give everyone just a couple seconds to think of their last minute questions, and if there are none, then we will wrap up. I guess I didn't do my normal spiel about the notifications. So if you are subscribed to the channel but you don't get notifications about when we live stream or when we post a new video or anything, you need to click the little bell. And then when you get the little drop-down menu, you need to change it from preferred to or personalized to all. And then if you're not subscribed and you liked what you saw here tonight, please hit subscribe. And you can also like the video if you're in here watching and you enjoyed the video. I don't know what the next thing we've got scheduled for release, but we should be getting something out sometime soon. And otherwise, I will see you all next week. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.